With the Fantastic Four set to release on July 25th for Marvel Studios and the Disney company, so far a lot of Marvel fans have been expressing a lot of concerns over this movie, not just based on the test screening results as well as the trailers, which haven't really been generating as much excitement as it should for a Fantastic Four film in isolation. We know that ever since the 2005, 2007, and 2015 movies really didn't meet the overall expectations and really did not meet a full-on comic accurate version of the traditional Fantastic Four. This is the one shot that Marvel and Disney actually has to do that properly, and so far it's looking more and more grim as time goes by. And Pedro Pascal and his politics and his ongoing rants are not helping. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, I pointed this out several times, but there is a lot of Pedro fatigue going on out there. A lot of Marvel fans specifically are very much tired of Pedro Pascal, especially in this case where he was cast as Reed Richards. I myself will admit that we could have done better with the cast. We could have at least, at the very minimum, have had someone perhaps like John Krasinski if they did not kill him off in the Multiverse of Madness. But this is where it gets even more intense, is that we know that Pedro gets very defensive, he gets very political, he doesn't know quite when to stop when it comes to that overall scenario. This is exactly why I like to call him Pedro Zegler, because he's basically Rachel Zegler 2.0. And surprisingly, he is still hired over at the Disney company, and Disney's not really taking all that much action against him. And I will be surprised if they do in the next couple of days. But what's interesting about all this is that with the Walt Disney Company doing everything that they can to improve the Fantastic Four, after lackluster test screenings and problematic reshoots, one major development now involves more to do with Pedro and how he recently attacked fans yet again for expressing their opinions and concerns over the trailers, leaks, and the test screenings. Pedro delivered the following. The problem today, especially for films that focus on our heroes from the pages of comics, is toxic fandom culture. They just don't know how to act like mature adults, when really these are movies for kids at the heart. So I think these fans that present themselves as critics lately really have to stop and look at themselves in the mirror to know that they are part of the problem, as to why movies like this are becoming a bigger challenge. These so-called fans need to learn that we are adapting a comic to the big screen, and when you are doing that, in many cases, it's best to shift away from the source material to create an original story. It gets exhausting having to listen and carry on the burden to hear those that are opposed to things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, something that I and Disney value very much, and it's something that brings everyone together, especially in Marvel films. It's about time that we embrace that more in Marvel films and or television programs, because under this presidency, which is very, very scary right now, they are aiming to abolish DEI, which is a very healthy thing and process for the film industry. I don't care what anyone else says. Anyone who labels DEI as woke or holding some form of an agenda, that is just bigotry. I have seen these arguments coming from Marvel fans, Star Wars, and even with The Last of Us, and it's childish behavior coming from grown men. Again, everyone needs to realize that these comic adaptation films are for kids at the core, so any of those arguments that fans tend to bring up is a poor debate. Now guys, let me just say one thing about this. These movies are not just for children or kids, that's just a given fact. There are a lot of adults out there in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that enjoy these movies. And I think that Pedro is just really misguided and really has no clue what he's talking about when it comes to the core audience base of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Kind of brings you back to what Kathleen Kennedy said about Star Wars, kind of brings you back to what Leslie Headland said about George Lucas and Star Wars, and how it really is not meant for adults at all. It goes to show you that they really have no clue what they're talking about. Alright, so again, at the end of the day, we know that DEI obviously is something that does indeed create tons of division. It divides a fan base, it doesn't work, it's not a good business model, and look, we know that Bob Iger is still trying to keep that intact in order to gain the trust or keep the trust of the top 3 shareholders over at Disney, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. No shocker there. which is why you're getting a combination of non-agenda driven movies and agenda driven films by Disney to balance it out a little bit, to please shareholders and to trick the other side, the audience members that are against the agenda driven garbage, to get them into the theaters. That's basically the overall strategy. Moving on, he goes on to allude further, I am rooting for Ironheart. I think this is a peak moment for Marvel because of how it supports diversity and a valued story. With the Fantastic Four, we aim to do things differently for Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben. These aren't the same characters from the comics per se, and you will see why. And if fans have an issue with that, well, then that just falls into nitpicking. Fans need to grow up and learn that DEI is the future for cinema, and quite frankly, we needed a lot more of that in Fantastic Four. I felt we were lacking with the support for DEI in this film, which was my own piece of criticism for the story. But getting to work with Julia and Vanessa has been a thrill. And as a male feminist, it's great to have these two on board for this great cast. I just think American citizens need to get more education on what diversity, equity, and inclusion really means. For far too long have they been fooled that this is some kind of a hidden message or a way for a studio or entity to embrace a culture war. This is so far from the truth, and I just hope everyone realizes that. So again, guys, I mean, Pedro Pascal keeps going off against the fans, labeling them basically as not fans, as phony fans, or just as posers, as he actually said that before. Very much like Leslie Headland said against Star Wars fans. In fact, I would not be too shocked if he was listening to her and picked up her overall vocal cues there. Again, the fact that this Fantastic Four film and the press tour so far, the marketing campaign, has been a little bit messy, and it really is not working well for Pedro Pascal. He's only making matters worse. Now look, we know at the same exact time, Disney and Marvel, they are trying to pull it all together. They are trying to pick up the broken pieces of Fantastic Four, and they are trying to make this into a perfect film. Where it stands right now, the running time is 2 hours and 10 minutes, so it's just above 2 hours. We talked about that as well. That could very well be changed with the upcoming reshoots that will be finished in a very, short number of days from now. But what's interesting about that, yet again, the fact that you have people like Pedro getting political again over a comic book movie and going on the same exact tiresome trope about DEI. Look, I think that people are just tired of that argument. Whatever side it goes through, the fact that people are just tired of DEI, that's exactly why you're not seeing the normal, performance for movies anymore, because people are just so tired of movies that actually have an agenda or some kind of a hidden message. Again, in this case with this movie, there's a lot of gender politics woven into the story and driven into the film, and that's something that Disney and Marvel are now panicking over, and it's far too late, and they're finding a way to hide it as best as possible. And I just don't know if it's going to work. We'll have to wait and see, but this could very well result in a very messy movie when it comes to the flow of the story. But overall, I would like to hear what everyone has to say about Pedro and his overall politics, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.